Welcome to Studio Ray. I'm Mamuka Kuparadza, and today we are going to talk about our new discussion about the conflict, about the resolution of conflicts, and what are the obstacles and what contributes to conflict solving. Let me introduce our guests. Today we are having politologist, political scientist Korneli Kakachia, sociologist Marina Elbakidze, and historian, researcher David Jishkariani. And also we have young people in the studio, those people who are interested in conflict resolution and are interested in conflict subject, and we are going to introduce them, and we are going to allow them an opportunity to ask questions. And our program is supported by COBERM project, and this project COBERM means the early prevention mechanism and confidence building. And before we start our discussion, let me offer you main part of our discussion. This is news digest from Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and our colleagues during 1 month collected reports, and these are the reports which they think would be interesting for Georgian viewers, and we are offering these reports without any changes, with direct translation, and very often these views and assessment, of course, don't coincide with our views, but we think that it's necessary, it's needed to hear the way just they are prepared for viewers. Passing Georgy Lukava to Georgian side caused another rally in Abkhazia. 2013, Georgy Lukava was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment for crimes in Abkhazia. And passing as a prisoner happened late 2017 within the framework of negotiation about the exchange of prisoners between Abkhazia, Georgia, and South Ossetia. According to Constitution, I have a right to pardon the convict. Now they ask just why I didn't address the pardoning commission, but this procedure is not envisaged and well and defined. This was just a political act, and it couldn't have been otherwise. All these actions were within the framework of legality. And the public of Abkhazia was very angry about the pardoning of one of the leaders of armed guerrillas, and opposition, of course, used the opportunity and demanded on step down of Raul Hajimba, and Parliament made a decision to give it to Constitutional Court to consider the legality of the actions of the President of Abkhazia. Before New Year, just yearly art market was open that united Abkhazian craftsmen. This is fifth market that is getting more and more extended year by year. I have been cooperating for 3 years, and I see the market getting more and more extended and contributes to creativity of our public. More than 70 craftsmen exhibited their manual hand-made works, and anyone could buy New Year decoration and gifts. In January, U State Theatre offered historical drama Keleshpe in 2 acts. Shalokids by a director, and about 20 young actors participated. It's about the early 19th century, about the history of Abkhazia, and this is a period when Count Keleshpe was conducting independent politics, and his name was known even outside Caucasus. According to historical data, which is returned from Turkey, has not been actually just staged only once. In 1950, based on Georgi Gulia plays, as performance named Black Guest was staged in Sukhumi, and Azek Kasba performs the part of Keleshpe, who is also known as a patriarch of Abkhazian stage theater. Anatoly Bibilov met Yura Dodik, Serbska Republic president, and President Bibilov wished development and peace to the republic and said that he is happy to be in this holiday in Serbska Republic. And the parties agreed on strengthening relationship and cooperation and signed a cooperation memorandum about sports, tourism, economics, and agriculture. And the most important part of the day was military parade attended by South Association delegation as well. President of South Association Anatoly Bibilov met Prince of Serbia Alexander Karageorgievich in Belgrade in the residence of the royal family, and President Bibilov talked about the reached results with the president. Bibilov also noted about the favorable conditions and about similarities between South Ossetia and Serbia, and the prince was interested in political, economic situation and history of South Ossetia, and he also talked about the cooperation and favorable spirits between South Ossetia and Serbia, and noted the positive role of Russian Federation in peace building in different countries. In Tkhinvali region, there was a murder. Mark Dudayev was found dead with gun, according to General Prosecutor. They raised charges and there is criminal case, and Mark Dudayev's body was in the territory of former club. According to investigative agencies, they conducted necessary work and identified the murderer, Kazev Vyacheslav Gersamovich, dweller of the same village. January 19, Christian world is celebrating one of the oldest holiday, Christianing Day. According to Evangelist Day, Ioan the Christian Jesus Christ in the river Jordan, and since then, January 19, Orthodox priests bless rivers and seas. Today, January 19, the believers and Orthodox clergy got together on the bank of a river Liachvi, and more than 100 people were Christian. According to tradition, Christianing in the river is allowed only January 19, and the tradition is taking water out of the river because it becomes like the river Jordan, and it's assumed to be curing and healthy. More than 10 people did so today. We have just seen the reports provided by our colleagues from Tkhinvali and Sukhumi, and as we see, life is going on, whether we like it or not. And we may just actually, we may be surprised at things, and sometimes we don't want to understand. The problem is that it's more than 25 years ago that we have conflict is on with Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and unfortunately, rather than getting closer to resolution, I think we are getting more and more estranged. I think estrangement rate is higher than before. So, first question is for you, Korneli. So, what is the reason for this high level of estrangement? So, it is based on the internal problems. So, we are actually, we find the way, or what? Well, to begin with, I think both factors are important, but I think most important factor is that between conflict sides, there is no trust. Parties, conflict sides don't trust each other, despite a lot of attempts in international forums, international organization, donors. I think sides are not ready for compromise. Actually, for any conflict to be resolved, all parties involved must be somehow ready, just must have plan A or plan B as well, and plan C. And in our case, it seems to me that conflict sides have only plan A, and they don't even consider other options, and therefore their positions actually just don't get in anywhere near each other. And besides, of course, geopolitical situation is, of course, just important. It's multi-layered conflict. Between Georgian Abkhazia and between Georgian Ossetian community, and plus the Russian-Georgian conflict. Russia is also active participant active party in this conflict, and directly has been supporting Sukhumi Tkhinvali since 2008, and added with geopolitical changes. Just in Black Sea region and post-Soviet area, which is characterized with opposition of the West and Russia, and it creates a situation at which countries that had never been actually oriented on compromise, they are now even stricter in their approaches and attitudes, and there are many cases, for example, just the more strict rules on administration borders and Russian FSB, Russian Secret Service units being there. And so, with one look, Georgia is trying to be more open, more exposed, and to get this region more integrated. In reality, it never happens. Thank you very much. It was, I think you just presented the problem in political aspect, of course, very interesting vision. And now I'd like to ask Marina. So, actually, Marina has been involved more than 10 years with Georgian Abkhazian and Georgian Association dialogue, and she has a long time experience of different projects. And so, Marina, what do you think about the changing of this dynamics? It's now more complicated, and our hopes and expectations on the background of people's diplomacy. So, what caused these problems? Maybe it's just fault of the community, community failed to see the ways to solve the conflict, or it's just some external factors. I think the answer is every factor that you have listed actually affect the current situation. But if you look deeper, certainly there are a few factors, but not all factors just look downward. Now let's speak about the transformation of the conflict. Actually, we don't say about the conflict resolution. This is very just a high-profile statement, and we know that it's a very challenging issue. We're talking about the transformation of the conflict, about the opportunities between the two parties. Georgian Abkhazian and Georgian Association. Just whether there are prospects for resolution, so whether these prospects are worse or still there is room for improvement of relationships. Korneli said that whatever we offer Abkhazians, we will answer no, and the positions, actually attitudes are quite well known. But if we talk about the attitudes of sides, I will speak more about Georgian Abkhazian conflict because I know more, and I'm involved into this conflict to a higher extent. Of course, for Abkhazians, most important is getting independence and recognition. For Georgian side, most important thing is keeping territorial integrity, restoring territorial integrity of the country. But if we speak in this context, I think there is nothing to talk about because the two parties have nothing to talk about, and both sides know the attitude of each other. And now, position is let's put off this framework and let's speak about the opportunity to restore dialogue and transform the conflict. Talking about transformation, I think a few elements must be noted. This is realistically what situation we have. For example, Georgian Abkhazian conflict and where we stand today, and what is the condition of conflict sides, and what are the political steps, and what are the spirits in relevant communities, both Abkhazian and Georgian communities. And I think conflict could be transferred in this way as well, and of course in the current situation, in a political situation where we are at the moment. I'm not going to go deep into the history. So what is the specific result? So it depends on what turning point is. So do we still have chances? I will speak more specifically. Well, based on my personal experience and observations, Abkhazians who actually come back home from some meetings, I think they just they speak less and less about their just experience. It was not like that in 2008. Yes, I agree with you. We have been together in the process of dialogue, and so I think the situation is worse here. Well, I think it can be explained, but let's speak with a realistic political picture. So where we are, what stage we are at. So just if you look superficially, let's compare. 2008 was kind of turning point, and I mean 5-day war in August. It to a certain extent, of course, it changed the balance of powers because after the war, Abkhazia was recognized by Russia, and South Ossetia was also recognized. Well, I'm speaking about Abkhazia, but I mean South Ossetia as well, and this realistically actually influenced their position as well. I mean, before that, there had been some chances, actually some opportunity for Abkhazians to address Georgia. Well, I think, yes, they were dependent on Georgia to a higher degree, and it was ready actually for political dialogue, but situation now is worse. Abkhazians actually don't take any steps towards us. Now just we are trying to take steps, and we offer something Abkhazians. Of course, well, not, I mean, political integrity. I mean, what other things we could solve? Yes, to a certain extent they respond. It depends on what kind of offer Georgia is making. It could be about environment. Of course, they are just cooperating because it's a common problem, and I think common sense suggests cooperation, whatever political situation is. But and they also just offer their suggestions, but these are actually unacceptable for Georgian sides. For example, I mean, signing some document, for example, some peace document where actually both parties would just take a pledge of not to use force or just to recognize Abkhazian Ossetian side as a official conflict side and things like that. So that's what they are demanded on. And I mean, just from Georgian side, we are offering some kind of things, some subjects, and from Abkhazian side, they also just offer counter steps. I mean, things which they want to talk about. But as Korneli said, there is no trust. And there is opposition, and but mostly, I mean, just Georgian side. I mean, in Georgia, there is opinion that if it just actually meets their steps halfway, they are nothing. They are not going to actually offer any compromise, and the situation for Georgia would be worse. That's what many Georgians think. So now just let's see the reports about the last year. This is the first time we are showing these reports. I mean, it's about the dialogue, I mean, about common things between Georgian and Abkhazian Ossetian groups. Within the framework of Koben project, 2017 in summer in the Turkish town Alanya, young Georgian Ossetian fencers got together in the fencing association club of city Alanya. Georgian coaches trained young people and shared their experience with Ossetian colleagues as well. And the Turkish host of head of the local club offered very warm welcome and conducted a masterclass for the participant. Georgian side gifted the young Ossetian fencers the necessary equipment for fencing. After the exercises and training, young people having returned to hotel, they actually participated in trainings and in funny short sketches and at impromptu photo exhibition where just activities of this event was reflected. Young people couldn't hide their emotions, and they just talked about newly gained friends. And along with sports and intelligent exercises, interesting excursions actually turned the meeting between Georgian and Alsatian young people into a big, happy holiday.
ინტელექტუალურ ვარჯიშებთან ერთად მზემ, ზღვამ, გართობამ და საინტერესო ექსკურსიებმა ერთ დიდ დღესასწაულად აქცია ქართველი და უსი ახალგაზრდების შეხვედრა.
So, prevention of family violence in the family in Guria region. So it's within the framework of Koban project in Batumi, and the meeting was attended just doctors and members of NGOs, police, and of course social workers, journalists, and members of local self-government. And they talked about referral system and talked about the prevention. Tamila Barakalai, and Crisis Center Director Bedmilo Gundivadze was invited, and Yever Lashvili talked about the pregnancy period violence, about the affecting of violence, and about the importance of doctors. And they just got familiar with prevention screening law and about the hotline for the victims of violence. So it's very important, actually. I mean, Education Ministry has a key role here, because the Education Minister should implement just necessary rules. Otherwise, we will get another generation of violators. I mean, men who will think that it is correct to beat their wives. And one of the meetings was held in Yerevan, and Abkhazian women shared their experience with Georgian women in terms of violence. So women living in Abkhazia, I mean Georgians, non-Georgians, they have actually a lot of problems, just like any women may have, and sharing our experience, I mean a long time experience, they got some experience. It was very positive, and next part of the project is training, information sharing with Abkhazian colleagues who will conduct the same just a workshop in Abkhazian in territory of Abkhazia. Young painters and just playwrights of young Georgians, Abkhazians. So it's based on the coalition Rights for Refugee about preparation of comics. The purpose of this comics is non-formal education in a modern democratic value contribution world over. Yes, we are supporting Georgianization relationships. They just call upon the conflict sides about the role and importance of peace building and trust between conflict sides. Before the meeting in Budapest, Georgian and Alsatian participants had met through social networks, and in Budapest they talked about the technical details of the workshop. Through workshops they gained just the necessary skills for work, and next stage of the project will be held in Yerevan, where just at least 4 finished comics would be exhibited. The project is supported by financial assistance of Coburn. So now let me talk with Mr. David Jishkariani. David, some time ago, I looked into your study, very interesting research, and gives answer just what we are teaching in universities, in schools. About Alsatian and Abkhazian conflict. Of course, all this is very just important. And what are your just observations as a result of this search? It's more like named what we know about the conflict, and result, simply speaking, is not much. And the subject of the problem is that conflicts should not be separately discussed. Away from other trends of Georgian society. What's going on in the education system? The same thing is about conflict. First of all, the existing narrative is taught, which is never just been reviewed. So this is actually suggested by history. So, for example, in universities, it is, this period covers just ancient times and including modern times, it seems like all processes in the world just sidestepped Georgia. And, for example, they never talk about the history of Georgia when Georgia was part of Iran, part of Turkey, etc. Besides, in the territory of Abkhazia, conflict is discussed as just, external conflict. Professors ignore the process of formation of nations. Both Georgians were just actually formed as a nation. And besides, in our school textbooks, they speak almost nothing of the conflicts. But you cannot criticize the authors of the book because, the authors actually have to pour over the huge amount of literature. And, actually, there is no scientific literature about the conflict since 1988 that would analyze the subject of the conflict. Dominating is, NGO researches, which together with the virtues have also just a lot of deficiencies as well. And, actually, NGO sector is oriented and actually they have some financial assistance and they have to conduct different researches in limited time. Unfortunately, in Georgia, no one finances just long-term research. And Georgia actually does not finance any research, and along with that, Georgia's government, Georgia state of Georgia, influences these researches. Position is, yes, okay, I will finance if you just live up to my expectations. It's not that in some kind of intellectual resources should be just created. No, it's definitely just, outright attempt to actually affect the research. And of course, very high prices in archives. We researchers, we cannot even get closer at the archive documents, and on this background, we get the result of what I have just in my report. We don't have any information what's going on in a conflict regions, and based on your reports, it's very clear. It's only part of this. But of course, beyond that, there are a lot of things going on. Of course, we have only a few journalists focused on the processes in these regions. Of course, it can be explained by manufacturers, but in fact, our society has no information about what's going on in Abkhazia and South Asia. For example, take the history of Georgy Lukava, and President Hajimba just almost lost his position. But we have seen only one or two reports on Georgian TV, and we couldn't understand what was the subject of all this. Then what happened? Actually, everything stopped, but actually processes in Abkhazia continue. The situation is actually quite tense, but media actually don't speak about that. And most importantly, political parties have no visions, have no political views. If you just look back at the pre-election programs of political parties, let's have an experiment. Let's hand around their actually just programs, and you can recognize which party is writing what. This is just slogans, and that's all about it. They have no visions. So we may conclude that it's not very pleasant for me as a Georgian citizen, but as a researcher, I should note that according to current situation, our state is not ready, not only for transformation of the conflict. Actually, we are not ready to take any proper step. I think it's about the same danger just as we faced back in the late 80s. When we got independence, but people did not know what independence was like. A political elite is not mature, is not ready to talk, and I would continue what Korneli said. We just very often mention dialogue and just peace and etc., etc. But the most important is what kind of language we should use with these people. We like or not, it's a different thing. Reality is the following. People who live in South Ossetia and Abkhazia, they don't speak Georgian. Yes, the elite knows only English because learning English is more expensive, much more expensive there than in Georgia. But the rest of Georgia actually don't speak Russian because only those Soviet Georgians, actually people who lived in Soviet times, can speak Russian. But young people actually cannot speak Russian, and it's very important. It's a huge problem in Georgia. A lot of experts, a lot of politicians actually avoid this issue because of political cliches, and we just noticed that in our research. And lastly, unfortunately, in Georgia, experts in scientific circles are not ready to actually come up with results that won't be liked by the community of Georgia. It's not for we have to tell the truth in our researches. Thank you very much. I think this is the reason what we teach, and it means we fail to actually contribute to confidence between our conflict sides. Now I would like to address young people. Please introduce yourself. I'm Anaki Koshvili. I'm a student, second-year student, and I'd like to express my viewpoint about all this. Generally speaking, in all conflicts, it's religious or just ethnical conflict, most important, the most difficult thing is that most important is when principle of self-identification of nation. And this is the hardest type of conflict, and we reviewed just all views which we used before 2008, as if we had some kind of positive trend. We managed to involve just the international community, and it looked like it was better. But before that, actually, we used for force, which actually happened very fast, but with no result. But today, I think we are practicing the same before 2008 policy. But I think based on the specifics of the conflict, I think we should do it other ways. And I think it is well explained by constructivism theory, meaning that countries and parties act toward each other according to the spirits they experience for each other. So therefore, I think we should think about the relationships and about the feelings Abkhazians and Ossetians feel about Georgia. Today, maybe the situation looks very desperate because, as you said, the only thing they want is independence. But if in about 30, 40, 50 years the reality will be the same, only 4 countries will just will be recognizers of Abkhazia, just small and not important countries, I think they will understand the situation is absolutely hopeless, and they will, I think, start thinking that maybe there is Georgia, which is always welcoming for them. I'm just shortly speaking. I want to say that we should use this time to turn Georgia into the country where they would like, Abkhazians would like to return. Talking about medical just assistance. It's completely free for Abkhazian associations. And for Abkhazian association young people, there are a lot of projects, and it's excellent. And so it's necessary just to use this time until they just come up to this conclusion. And we should continue this way. Welcome, everybody. I'm Nana Abuladze. I graduated Black Sea International University, and this topic was my just bachelor's degree subject. And Mr. David here talked about the issues in education. I think the only reason just why I just wrote my just work, actually I had not know anything about Georgian-Abkhazian conflict, and yes, of course, I talked with other young people of my generation. For them, this conflict is something really from the remote past. We don't learn about it at school, at universities, and unless this problem is solved, I think we cannot move forward. Second, just charming Abkhazians with development of Georgia. Well, I had some respondent from Abkhazia, and I participated also in dialogue with Abkhazians. I think we should consider that Abkhazians themselves don't think about that. Don't think like, okay, when Georgia gets developed, let's go back to Georgia. The farther we go without Abkhazians, the farther behind they stay, and for them it's something like self-respect. We are not equals, they say, and I think this might just backfire unless we get Abkhazians involved with the processes going in Georgia. Okay, somebody also wanted to say something. Yes? I'd like to... Actually, we have a lot of religious statues in Abkhazia, but we see a lot of vandalism. First of all, they are just abusing our religion. It's not an issue of Abkhazian people. I think this is the issue of Russia. They're abusing our religion in Abkhazia. Russians actually, influence Abkhazians because they know our just churches and our religious shrines. Actually, it's very important for Georgians. It's for many Georgians, it's even more valuable than our mothers. Yes, of course, Abkhazia is a huge pain. I love Abkhazians, I love Abkhazia, and people talk generally about bad situation in Abkhazia. Abkhazians even talk about that. It just moves me to tears. For example, one of my students told me that in order to have classes of English, they had to walk 4 kilometers in rain or shine. And the situation is very bad about that in Abkhazia.
Well,
I'd like to answer that, developing Georgia, we cannot be just attractive for Abkhazians. Simply, I'd like to draw a parallel. When someone is superior compared with you, it doesn't mean that, just as long as you cannot catch up with it, just you want to be with him. For example, we actually still want to be integrated with the European Union. Of course, they are superior, but anyway, as long as I understand, I think it was something different. As long as we are developing, we are just aspiring to Europe. Here, involvement of Abkhazian associations, of course, would be very valuable, and we should try our best to have them involved in this process. And if we do that, it would contribute to our dialogues. Now we will see media monitoring prepared by our colleagues in Abkhazian Association, and we do the same thing in Georgia, and after that we will just sum up our discussion. So last month we continued monitoring of Georgian, Ossetian, Abkhazian media, and we were assisted by Abkhazian Ossetian colleagues. According to our Ossetian colleague, so toward Georgian government, hate speech was used quite frequently. A Republic newspaper talked about the Echal Gori hospital employees who are financed from hostile Georgia. Another article is about the military reserves. They say that beyond the state borders there is country Georgia that doesn't want to recognize our state, our independence. So Georgia doesn't recognize the existence of South Ossetia, and at the first opportunity, Georgian government will use force to settle South Ossetia, says the article. Fruit and vegetable from Georgia, vitamins or poison. This is an article from a newspaper, South Ossetia, and author talks about the necessity of control over Georgian imported vegetable and fruit. And they also talk about the new genocide museum, where expositions should be constantly exhibited about the crimes against South Ossetia, and it should cover not just last 20 years, but the whole 20th century. 20s of the last century. In Abkhazian media, Georgi Lukava passing was actually very much high profile. So they think that in case of just one prisoner is released from Georgian prison, we should support each other. We should think about what Ossetians experienced during the Ossetian-Georgian war. Their children were just held hostages and things like that. According to Raul Hajimba, as a leader of government, he thinks that passing Georgi Luka was political act that was necessary based on the events of 2008. Situation was not easy, he says. And South Ossetia, just experienced the blow of Georgia. Guys who were taken prisoners, they should have been returned to territory of South Ossetia. This is the start of this process. And according to just spokesperson of President of Abkhazia, passing Georgi Lukava was part of the exchange of prisoners. So Georgian media just cites the article according to the spokesperson of Abkhazia. And a claim was sent about the murder of Georgi Otchazoria. So organization thinks that Abkhazian side did not effectively investigate the case about the murder. Russian State Duma supported the military agreement with South Ossetia. It means that armed forces of South Ossetia would be officially included in the part of Russian army. The USA denounced the agreement between Russia and State Ossetia. That was according to State Department of the USA on the website. Today, that's all. We will continue monitoring of Georgian and Abkhazian Ossetian media. Goodbye now. So, Korneli, please, let's start with you. Yes, let's just sum up our discussion. Yes, we talked about different problems, and I would actually add two important things. Along with opposition and controversies, there are also just value and ideological differences that actually makes even more complicated the involvement of Abkhazian Ossetians with European processes. We haven't researched that, but I think a large part of population, at least in Tkhinvali region, they don't want to have anything to do with the European Union, and they consider themselves as, at least in the future, part of Russian Federation. It's more ambivalent, actually, more in Abkhazia. There is some part, actually, of people who want to be with Europeans, but the fact is that on their part, the message is quite clear. And along with that, geopolitical situation. I mean, controversies between Russia and European Union actually doesn't contribute to this involvement. And also just taking, all things considered, the policy of victimization in these regions makes it more difficult, more complicated. If one of the sides does not have any just drive, if there is, just ideological and value differences, it of course doesn't contribute to conflict resolution and doesn't contribute to transformation of the conflict either. And we talked about the meetings, about dialogues, but we talk about some plan. So how we just could transform and step by step, just to have some kind of scenario how we can move towards resolution. And it should be added with one important factor. Geopolitical actors must be ready to be neutral, but it's not in our case, because Russia is official party involved in this reality, and even just the parties just wanted very much to resolve conflicts. Position of big actors actually complicates the prospects and taking serious steps. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. And do you have any recommendation or any advice for the conflicts to be transformed? What would you wish our community? Well, actually, I've been concentrated on my research, and I've been thinking about it for a long time. What I would wish, I think there should be some new centers opened in universities. This center actually should be available for any student and people who would be working. They would be working on just analysis, and they wouldn't be attached to political reality. It means that they would have an opportunity to think long term and just work out, develop some programs, etc., conduct different researches and think about these subjects. And what we talked about, there's no information, there is no research, and those people who try to research, I think they face a lot of changes. They say that if there is any information available, it's so dissipated and scattered that it's very hard to get this information. I think there should be some kind of common bank of information. So despite these political difficulties, we are not ready even locally. To say nothing of those challenges that don't depend on us, but they affect actually us. So, Marina, what would you recommend? What young people, in your opinion, should do? How we should do some breakthrough? Well, I think giving recommendations is both hard and easy, of course, but we need that. We have to act. Getting back to transformation of the conflict, yes, of course, we all think about just a positive transformation, but however, we superficially talk today, and we see that sometimes we have just upward trend, sometimes downward trend. About the transformation of the conflict, and sometimes as if we just come upon the dead-end situation from some point of view, maybe became difficult. I think political and geopolitical situation don't contribute to the conflict, and young people know about this, they talk about that, and there is big part who have actually less information, and or maybe even just they are less interested, and therefore they have less information. So, and all things considered, we have different spirits, and I think all our community must be ready actually for transformation. I think our spirits, our moods, of course, are changing based on the research. I think we are more actually peacefully oriented and minded. I think more people support now peace and dialogue, etc. And we also say that it's not going to be resolved tomorrow or today, and we should look at it long term. Georgian, Abkhazian, Georgian Ossetian conflict. And from this respect, views have been changed. Yes, now we are less interested because young people don't learn it at school, but still we should we should look for those opportunities that are still left, and I think that while Georgia and Abkhazia Ossetia exist, and sometimes they have common problems, different just problems, but these problems can be just solved only through communication with each other. I mean, positively speaking, we sometimes are forced to talk with each other. Well, this leaves us some opportunity to talk with each other. I mean, please, I'm not going to just list these problems, but along with environment, we have some Georgian population in Abkhazia, ethnic Georgians in Abkhazia. And we know that actually just the citizens of Abkhazia Ossetia, as they are our citizens as well. And I think we'll consider them as our own citizens, and their problems should be considered as our own problems. So it means that we are forced to have communication, I mean, positively speaking. So either we do that or we don't that for different reasons, but one way or the other, we should actually look for different ways. Now, I mean, just we speak through some NGO sector, but there is some communication, by the way, some communication lines on governmental level. I mean, there is Geneva talks. So, yes, one way or the other, there are some communication lines. And maybe we are not happy about the level of this communication, but I think we should develop some long-term program. We should have common consensus about this. Of course, Abkhazians will have their interests, we will have our interests, but still, I think there is some space, some room where we can have some dialogue on any issue. And I think that we should talk more about those controversies to understand each other better. Thank you very much for coming here for interesting talk. And Studio Rare definitely will come back to the subject of conflict. And meanwhile, you can watch us every week on different social political subjects. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.